Is Matt coming? Is Matt coming tonight?
No, he's not able to. He sent an email.
Okay, we got some tables here. Good evening. We're going to start our select board meeting for February 28th. I'm John Martin, Francine Tishman, Jim Labrie, Rini Groden. Matt Rowland couldn't make it tonight. We're being recorded and it's going out live. If you can join us for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. If it's possible, if we can have the Southampton members of the Hampshire Regional School Committee up close, maybe on these tables, or that way we'll all be together. And if we need another table, we'll be glad to get it. You can squish in? Maybe if you want to move the table that way, feel free, Greg. And John, can you maybe pull the table? You're squeezing Greg in here. Yeah. Hey, there you go.
Can they also introduce himself? You're gonna have them introduce himself.
Okay, while you're organizing, before we have you introduce yourself, I just wanted to let everybody know that the property at 111 Glendale Road has closed as of today, so the town owns it. Yeah. So that was a great effort by the Open Space Review Committee and a lot of other people out there. So we want to say thank you to everybody that participated, and that was the first land that we got through the Open Space Review process. So congratulations, everybody. And I don't know if you have any names. Rini is on the committee with me.
I think it was a great effort, and there was a lot of community support, and I'm grateful. The grant helped tremendously to get $400,000 from the state, an additional $10,700 to reach out to landowners. So there's a lot of good news.
And the CPA funding.
Yep, community preservation funding was able to only be 300 and something thousand as opposed to borrowing against future. So that's a good thing.
Win-win.
We thank the CPC committee and all the members for voting for it. So.
Yep.
That's the first of many we hope to obtain. That was Chapter 61 land. Okay, so we have no appointments, no hearings. Does the select board have some reports before we get into the Hampshire Regional? Rini?
Well, I'll let you talk about the open space meeting last night. But besides that, no, all of them meet next week. Council of Aging, CPC, and Conservation, they all meet next week.
Okay. Francine?
Yeah, the school, North School Committee met last night. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend. John attended in my place. You want to add anything?
No, I just went to the school committee, the local school committee, and talked a little bit about the Hampshire regional budget and the funding that is there and the increases. And I invited people here to join us, and because it's going to have a trickle-down effect depending on what happens at the regional school.
Okay. And the other announcement, the Master Plan Implementation Committee was canceled Monday night because of the windstorm.
Jim?
And that's it.
No, the planning board meeting's tomorrow night, so on Tuesday I'll have an update.
Okay. So the Open Space Review Committee last night, we got a grant of roughly $10,700, I believe, to promote open space. And there's 3 events scheduled. April 10th, there's a kickoff from 5:30 to 8:30 at the church. We're going to have at the church, and we're going to have Chapter 61, and we're inviting people that have Chapter 61 land there to come and hopefully talk about donations and what they can do to help us out. And April 30th, we're having another meeting at the church. Both of those meetings are going to be moderated by Mark Wamsley, and we're going to have people talk about Chapter 61. Attorney Dick Evans is going to be there on the 10th. Concom rep Charlotte Engstrom is going to be there. And Lincoln Fish is going to talk about invasive species, so it should be interesting. And also Barry Sear, who's a current landowner who has a conservation restriction on his land, will be there to talk about that. This will all go out in a little more detail. And then May 11th is going to be a walk, hike, picnic And we're going to have Molly Hill, a naturalist, coming to that event. So we're going to do some actually walking on the trails and in the Glendale Road area. So all that'll be coming out soon, but some good events planned.
Is that going to be recorded?
What was
Do you have
that?
any way to record that meeting? And
Yes, they're
broadcast?
looking into
They're
that because
looking
it's at
into
the
that.
church.
Perfect.
Yeah, the church part, the hike, probably not, Jim. Unless we have a GoPro that somebody wants to donate. Okay. Just want to check the rest of this. Okay, so we're Hampshire Regional School Committee. And this is basically why we called this meeting, to talk to the folks on Hampshire Regional, because the 6 members, and if we can, just for the cameras, can you start, Tammy, introduce yourself as a member of the Hampshire Regional School Committee from Southampton?
Tammy Williams, I'm on my second term.
Bill Curran, I'm on my 3rd term.
Jim Blarmont, my first.
Margaret Larson, second term.
Gregory Matt, I'm appointed from the North School Committee. I'm Troy Rosted, serving my second term.
Thank
On
you.
the Finance Committee, Gloria York.
John Woodward, Finance Committee.
Okay, so that's 7 people, but we have 6 elected, and you're appointed, Greg?
Are you a
Okay.
voting member?
Are you voting?
It's my second year.
Okay, so all 7 have a vote? 6? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I put you down twice, Greg. Okay, 6. And that 6 votes makes up roughly 47.2345%, or whatever that number is. Okay, so last month, we were at the school committee meeting. I went to the school committee meeting, and these folks were here. And I believe, talking to Superintendent Osborne, a couple of months ago, the school committee gave a charge to him to come up with a budget that was level service, he told me. Is that accurate? There was no numbers put onto that until the last school committee meeting. It's the first time everybody saw the actual numbers. Okay. And when we were looking at them, there was a little breakdown with the towns. And Southampton, for instance, the assessment is going to go up 4.11%. In other towns, like Williamsburg is going up 12%, Westhampton almost 5%. So everybody's going up well over the 2.5% that we get through normal increases through Prop 2.5. Does anybody need a copy of that, the assessments? I brought a couple if anybody wants them. No?
Yeah, why don't you send one up? It's not one of his, is it?
John, with that being said, overall, it's a 2.71 increase
Right.
from last year. So
Right.
even though we're, the 4.1, budget itself is only, well, I say only, but that 2.71, yes, proposition 2 has it, it is still over, and we have to make that up.
But the trickle down to the towns is the assessment, and that's what the towns worry about. And for Southampton, that's 4.11%. So if you fold it back in with all other revenues, but our assessment is going to increase by 4.11%. So I don't, if anybody wanted that. And that is a level service budget, just what the school committee asked the superintendent to put together, right? There's nothing, the only other thing that was in there was a van, and it was an idea about buying a van and having a van driver, and that is a good idea, at least in my opinion, because it's going to save some money along the way, and we need that. So the question is, if we bring forward at the next, now let me back up. Last week, February 20th, we had an HMAC meeting, which basically consisted of all the 5 towns over at the town hall in Westhampton. 5 select boards went and 5 finance committees went, and we all discussed the budgets and the increases. And the folks who were there can tell me if I'm judging this wrong, but it seems like all the towns were pretty concerned about the increases in all their towns, and some were feeling that they wouldn't be able to do a budget with these large increases. They'd have to decrease services in their town. So it was a pretty spirited discussion. Is that fairly accurate? I don't want to say something that's not accurate. And I guess we had a couple questions, and I know Bobby's not here, so I'm not sure we can answer the questions. One of them,
So can I say, that I have
She on the phone now?
Text, no.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is that has her ringer on, and I can text her or call her if we.
And she's the principal of Hampshire Regional, so it's for the
Yes,
records here.
sorry.
Oh, no problem. She can't go up to the podium.
No.
So a couple questions we've been talking about, and I guess we need a little bit of an answer to it. But Bobby was saying that she put into the budget a 5% placeholder, if you will, for health insurance for everybody. And because it's not going up this year, there was some changes in copays and all that, that 5% could come out of it. So the question was, is it 5% based on the total budget for health insurance for active employees as well as retired, which is roughly $2.1 million? Because if that's the case, there's about $110,000 that would come off of this budget, top of this budget, and go back, minus the 25% that we owe the consortium that supplies the health insurance. I guess it's in there that we have to share with the consortium 25% of any savings. So roughly $110,000 minus 25% is about $85,000. If that's where the 5% is on there, we can take that right off the top, that'd be a nice little savings. And we understand she put it in there as a placeholder because she didn't know what was going to happen. And then the question came up, or the information came up at the HMAC meeting, that there is a excess and deficiency fund that the Hampshire Regional has, that they're allowed to put a maximum of 5% of the total budget in there year to year. And one of the questions on that, we have a little different opinion, and we want to make sure we get the right information, is that 5% each year, is that cumulative from year to year? The excess can be rolled forward, we understand, but we also understand that it still can't go more than 5% of the total budget. So 5% of this year's budget is roughly $725,000. If $500,000 was rolled forward from last year, does that mean you can only add $225,000 to that? Or can you take the $500,000 and also add another 5%, which is $726? Pardon? Okay?
Margaret Larson. So the E&D, or Excess and Deficiencies Fund, is not something we put aside at the beginning. It's something that happens at the end, like free cash. It's essentially free cash. So that doesn't get certified by the state until sometimes March. And so we don't know exactly what it is. We generally do not approach that 5% mark. It is not cumulative, so it's 5%.
It's a max of 5%.
It's a max of 5%.
Okay. So maybe you have the information. It seems like the numbers we got back in fiscal 16, we had 532,000. Fiscal 17, 561,000. Fiscal 18, 485,000 in that E&D. So if that accumulates at the end of the budget period, that's surplus needs versus what was spent.
Correct.
Okay, so if we're running $500,000 every single year at the end of the year, why don't we plan for that and use that money during the budget process?
As Bobby explained last Thursday, we are, which you can discuss whether or not you think that that's a wise decision, because we honestly don't know at the end of year. We kind of can project what that the E&D might be. We don't know, but we have been including that as part of the budget.
So, can you explain? I'm
and
sorry.
then whatever is left has been used for capital.
Can you explain how that money accumulates over the year? Where does it come from?
Sure. I mean, it's a little hard to say, but I would, from what I understand, much of it is when students come in and out of district. So it could be a salary issue. So we have someone who leaves in the middle of the year, and then someone who costs us less money comes in. So that could be part of it. We might have a student. We've had some students that generally cost us quite a bit of money in nursing or, in other care. And if that student leaves in the middle of the year, then we have money. So we try to keep it as tight as we can, but as you know, in the town, the vagaries of budgeting means that sometimes you end up with some money at the end. But we have been, unfortunately, having to kind of look ahead and say, oh, you know, we're going to need some of last year's free cash to fund the budget.
Okay, so it's been consistent, at least for 3 years, roughly $500,000. So if you're using some from last year, you're still generating the same amount during the next fiscal year. So it seems like we're rolling well over $500,000 from year to year based on how we accumulate it. So that's a pot of money, if you will, that may be used for other things. And did you have a question? I jumped in.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, talking about the pattern, the consistency of rounding at around $500,000 a year. And then we got some expenditures against that. So, John, I'll just mention in fiscal year 18, there was an excess of $485,911, of which $165,000 was spent, which left a balance of $320,911. So I'm assuming that's the current balance in the fund, because I don't have that information.
And I don't either.
Okay, but still, that's substantial. That mirrors the
But
free
we've
cash
been using that in order to balance the future budget, from what I understand.
But-
That's
So
what,
this
I
money-
believe that's what Bobby said.
Right, but that's where we're having a hard time
Yeah.
because it continues to be $500,000 sitting there,
Right.
sitting, maybe not the proper term, but rolling forward. So if you're spending it from last year, you're making the same amount in excess this year and on and on. So it seems like it's a steady pot, if you will.
But we don't know what would happen if school choice goes away. Like there's, you know, a number of things that I think all of us who have budgets understand that you need to be prepared for things that you don't know might happen.
Right, so segueing the school choice in fund, as I understood it from this meeting on the 20th, there's roughly $375,000 in that fund also, and understanding you want to keep some there if school choice goes away or gets
Right,
choice out versus choice in
right.
for rainy day for emergencies. But I guess up here, we're looking at, boy, this could be a year of emergencies, and we looked at our revenue for coming up for fiscal 20 with the 2.5 levy and other aids that we have here, and we're looking at an excess of revenue coming in versus the commitments we have of only $127,000. So if our commitment to Hampshire Regional goes up $204,000, I think that was the number, we're going to eat through that 127 and have to take it from somebody else. So that's our concern. And you folks have the tough job, really, because you've got to vote on the budget up there,
Right.
knowing that you're from Southampton here, and it may trickle down to Norris, fire, police, and all that. So that's why, obviously, we're here. So if there are some excess funds, the choice in funds and the E&D funds, would this not be a good time to use some of that in order to decrease the amounts that the other towns have to absorb this year? Because as you heard at the meeting, people are in dire straits. My opinion, again, is if this goes as it is, it gets voted on just like it is, and we bring it to town meeting, it's going to get voted down in at least 2 of the towns, if not 3 or 4 of the towns. And the process after that is we send it back to the Hampshire Regional School Committee. You have to revisit it, and we can't tell you how to revisit it. It gets rejected, and you have to come back with another number. And if that number still isn't sufficient, we can send it back again by town meeting, 2 towns. And if it comes back again, the state can step in and take control of the budget and put you on a month-to-month budget plan, and none of us want that.
So if I can speak for.
Absolutely.
In general, I think that school committees at both Norris and Hampshire Regional have been reluctant to dip into school choice funds.
Understood.
And in the past, it happened at Norris, and then it happened again, and it happened again, and we find ourselves in the situation we are in Norris. So there has been a reluctance to do that. This might be the year where we dig into more of it. We have dug into some,
Yeah.
but we don't know if, particularly if we have to start cutting programs or teachers, what that might do to school choice. We don't know, for example, what's going to happen when Easthampton starts building their, new schools, and we start seeing a loss of students from Easthampton. We don't know.
Right.
And so, I think that's always been a true rainy day fund. If this is the rainy day, then we have to look at that. But I think from a fiscal standpoint, fiscal responsibility, the right decisions have been made over time in order to protect some of those funds in case there is, a major emergency.
But the rainy day is every.
You're going to have to go up here, John, yeah. Yeah, I think the Hampshire Regional delegation has protected the Hampshire Regional School like they were supposed to do. I mean, Hampshire Regional is a great school, and I don't think anybody would say otherwise. It's just
Absolutely.
now we're, in Erin is back there, and I want her to come up at some point, but we're always pitting people against each other. And if we only have 127,000 and Hampshire wants 204,000, the only way we're gonna get around that is another Prop 2.5 override. It passed by 100 votes last year, and I know us as well as others said, we're gonna reset this year, and, my personal opinion is we're not gonna do well on that, so. But anyways, sorry,
Right,
John.
to her point,
You wanna introduce yourself?
John Labria, Finance Committee. To her point, rainy day fund, whatever you want to call it, it's rainy every year. And so you're using unsecured money to
Yeah.
support the budget.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's ways where you can eliminate that somehow, and that money goes back to the town budgets, and that way it can get put into the budget every year. Just throwing that out. I don't know how it works at the school committee. With the school budget.
I'll just answer that question quickly. That particular money, according to Mass General Law, cannot be given back to the towns. So that's.
The only way
Unless it
we
goes
could
over
do it
5%.
is,
Unless it goes over 5%.
yeah, the only way we could do it is they would
Cut it on
reduce
the
the
front
budget.
Yeah, I mean, my thinking was not to impact the services at the school. If we could find a way to significantly reduce what would the anticipated excess money will be at the end of the 2020 school year, you will have saved the towns all collectively several $100,000, which means then we could meet our obligation to the budget. Because looking at this pattern year after year of coming up at or around $500,000 in excess, says to me, well, at the beginning of the year, perhaps we could use a sharper pencil to arrive at our numbers that would ultimately reduce the budget and the obligations that the town have. Because it's really clear that we just don't have it. And going back, and I mean, I don't think asking for another 2.5% override is going to make it. So within our means, it's up to us to find a solution. And to my knowledge, at least in a while, this is the first time I think we're all talking together and looking at that. And we all have different perspectives, but I think if we bring all of that thinking together, maybe we can arrive at a good solution.
My kids both went to Norris and Hampshire Regional back in, the early 200s, or when was it, John? All of our kids went at the same time. It was around
Graduated
2005 and 7 is when they graduated from Hampshire. But anyway, I was on the Hampshire Regional School Committee, and I felt at the time that they were both phenomenal schools, and they both had really good experiences.
Yes, I have.
But I also felt like, as a member of the school committee, it was kind of hard to see the whole picture when you're coming in from one particular town. And back then, and historically, other towns, all the other towns would approve the budget. Southampton would be the last town to vote, and we would be dragged into the budget as it stood, and then would have to deal with the fallout from that, which is basically it hurt the other town departments because 4 out of 5 towns would approve the budget. Southampton, even if they said no, they would still have to go along with the budget. And so year after year after year after year, whatever Hampshire Regional asked for, Hampshire Regional got. And I think that it's had a negative effect on Norris. I'm just hearing about, so I left the meeting in Westhampton with a couple of things, exactly what John just said, like, you have a free cash account that has $500,000 in it. What a luxury. That was the teachers that Norris would have lost if it wasn't for the 2.5 override. Mm-hmm. They're trying to do the same thing that you're doing with a van, or the school's trying to do with a van, which is come up with a reading teachers so that we can keep more in-district placements. And then the choice in, they already spent all their choice funds, so I just feel like this is great that everybody's here and that we're all kind of at the same table, because I do think that we'd have to get as close, if not at 2.5 as possible in some way that doesn't hurt the school, because that's what we have to live with. So anything else is going to negatively impact the rest of the departments. That's my feeling after leaving Westhampton.
Anything more from up here?
Yeah, pretty much, we don't want to lessen the service of the Hampshire Regional School. They got a great reputation. I think working with the 5% that they pulled out of the increase for the health insurance, and
We've got to check that number, because
Can I
at the
talk about
meeting,
that?
it was only 35,000 or so.
Yeah,
Right.
She said she said it wasn't going to be much.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly what the actual increase is, but I do know that the budget requires a buffer because teachers have until August 31st to retire. So if they retire, then you are then funding them in retirement as well as funding a new teacher who might be coming in. So there needs to be a little bit.
That could be your.
But I don't know what that
rainy day
is.
fund.
Yeah, I don't know what that amount
Right.
is. But.
So we need to clarify that amount. Is it 30,000 or is it 85? Because that, whatever, excuse me, whatever reduction that is goes to the bottom line without hurting anybody. That's key. So, Aaron, can I draw you up there? Because I know, being chair of the Norris School Committee, you have some thoughts on this.
I know.
Because, it does have a trickle-down effect.
Yeah, so Aaron Kuchar, chair of the school committee in Norris. I mean, I hear all of this. My son goes to regional, so I mean, I love regional. I think it's great, but I think what is happening is what we're looking at next year. If you guys get what you're asked for, if regional gets what they're asked for, we have an extra almost $200,000 in added district placements that came this year. We were paying half of it right now, 75 that hit our budget. If we have to pay that in addition to any contractual increases that are still being worked on, there will be cuts at Norris, like significant cuts, and we will never personnel cuts, and we will not be looking at any of that program that we talked about. We have the numbers on the program that we want to put into place for the and then there could be other additional people going out. So we're at this crossroads right now with Norris, and I think we talked about it. We dipped into all those funds. We have nothing available. We're running on a shoestring. When we did the override, all we did was save the positions from leaving, or not having to cut them. But I just think that we at Norris, the way it has worked, have had to continue to find, cut, do all sorts of things. And I would just hope that as the school committee for Hampshire, that maybe you can try to do a little bit of finding or cutting or shedding or something that might make sense without really affecting too much, but really looking at that hard, because the detriment that it's going to make to our school, to Norris, and then even to the other departments in this town is going to be detrimental. It really is. We can't, that's a lot. 200,000 increase to just one area is going to be humongous. I know it's not comfortable. It's not comfortable to go back and say maybe you do have to look at one small program to get rid of or something. I don't know the answer. I don't know your budget, but I think that there may have to be a cut here and there. We've been making cuts for the last 10 to 15 years. And we lost 2 teachers that never got replaced. So, we're already, and so have been other departments. I just think as a town, we talked about this being an extremely difficult year. It's an extremely difficult year to everybody. And I think we just have to understand that, and it doesn't feel good, but what can we really look at doing? I agree you can't touch school choice, but when I look at those numbers, you have about $800,000 in a safety net right now between the 5 and the school, 300 in school choice. Can you cut that to 500 and keep your 300 in school choice and get down to 200? I don't know. Is there a way to do some of that? Because right now we're at a spending freeze at Norris. So, it's really, really, really tough. So I don't know. I don't know your budget, but I just hope we can kind of understand where the other departments are, and maybe have to make a couple hard decisions here and there. So.
And just to follow up on that, from what Rini said, and tell me if I got it accurate, there hasn't really been any cuts at Hampshire Regional in a long time, because they've always gotten what they put in there. So there's been no cuts of programs of teachers, and not that we're advocating it, but Norris, like they're saying, they've had these time after time. So is it time to look at a tough decision, or is it time to use those surplus funds? I mean, two different ways, and I
Or a
hope.
little of both.
Yeah.
Is there a little of
Right,
both? I
and
don't know.
and I hope
mean,
we're
don't
gonna
know.
get some thoughts from you folks on maybe ways to do it that we're not thinking about. Margaret?
Please, someone else get up here. So a couple things. I do want the audience at home to know that over the past 3 years, we have not added any teachers. We've replaced teachers, except for a part-time art teacher who was added because our art program was growing, and it's part of the reason we get school choice money. And we also added a part-time adjustment counselor, and that was to help kids who are transitioning from being out for physical injury or emotional distress, and that helps bring students in. So we, if we look at the numbers, that has
You've had a
helped.
decrease in enrollment, though.
Excuse
You've
me?
had a decrease in enrollment, though.
Yeah, you have.
Right, right. So
Over the past 3 years.
Right, so I wouldn't expect an increase in
But we're getting
teaching.
more, but we have the school choice. So we're
Okay,
not, but
total enrollment has gone down.
it
So-
has.
So I don't know why would teachers be added then? You said you haven't
These
had
were
an
two
increase.
We
specialty.
added, we've replaced teachers.
Yeah,
And then we added a part-time art teacher.
okay. But I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
expect teaching roles to increase if you've had a decrease in enrollment, right?
Well, I think it was a part-time who then got moved to full-time because of the interest that we had in the art classes.
Okay.
I think that's what it,
And I guess
boiled
I'm
down
gonna
to.
talk for Aaron. If somebody had an interest in the art class at Norris, they don't have the ability.
I
to-
understand that,
I think that's where you're going, right, Aaron? Yeah.
right. But what I'm saying is that we're not adding big programs.
No, but you've been able to add a couple, which is a great thing. And she was talking about Norris not cutting.
I know,
so
not, right.
It's that, yeah.
No, I understand that. I just wanted to be clear that we haven't started a Latin program. We haven't started, brand new AP programs that we haven't been able to work with
Right.
existing personnel.
But we did
Except for
talk,
the adjustment counselor.
right, but on the good side of that, we did talk about if there's some way to start a new program that brings kids back in and gets the funding up from choice in. That's a
Right.
great idea.
And I think that's part of what the investment in teachers and, continued investment has been able to do is able to retain students. I mean, our populations are decreasing.
Right.
So when populations decrease throughout Western Massachusetts, the schools are seeing a decreasing population.
Right.
However, we've been able to retain more students from Williamsburg and other places that we have. We've continued to grow our school choice.
Right.
And I think that's, part of the reason that we have been, not reluctant to cut programs, but careful about what we cut because we know that those are some of the things that attract people. It is a risk.
Have we cut any programs there at all over the last 5 years?
No, there's been no.
You said you're reluctant. It gave me the impression that maybe we have that I just didn't know about it. Okay.
I think there's gaps we've been trying to fill.
Right, and they haven't filled.
One that's been kind of near and dear to me, and I think it is to
Corey, get up here.
Yeah.
Got to introduce yourself, yes.
I'm
Margaret,
Corey
you-
Brosted. I'm on the school committee, but I'm not as knowledgeable as some of the other folks about some of the finance pieces. So, I'm speaking as, I'm somebody that graduated from Hampshire Regional, right? My family's from here. My wife is a teacher at Norris, actually, right? So, I'm invested all the way around. Some of the areas where there are gaps that I think are very important for moving forward into our population in the world is things like computer science, right? It's been a deficiency. I learned how to program, and I use it in my profession. I'm a geneticist. I use it in my profession every day. It's something I use to manage my people. It's not something that existed even a few years ago when it fell through the cracks. And that is a new program without new teachers, right? So it's a new area that's important for the next generation. It was important for my generation, not to mention the next ones that are coming. So these are things that I would say would be at risk if you were about cutting. It's essential for just about all of our graduates. It's a program I wanted to touch on at least.
And just,
I
we're
wanna
talking
make clear
about,
that it was an existing teacher. So we didn't hire someone new. It's, I think, one class that we have, one section of it.
still very limited.
It's very limited.
So a
it's
teacher
one-
took on an additional
A teacher
class.
took on an additional class.
it's a good way, yeah.
It's like the librarian.
Correct.
the
So
AP?
for the new AP program, the librarian is taking charge of that. So we're not hiring to, work with some of these new programs, things that we need. Because we were hearing from colleges that we don't have all the classes that we need in order to have our students put their best foot forward when it comes to applying.
Can I ask another question about the administration? So I know that when I was involved in the school committee, there were 850 students, I think, and there were over 100 school choice students from Easthampton. At that time, they didn't have the new high school, and I'm sure it's less now, more people are staying there. But they also had one vice principal and they had one principal. What's the administrative structure? I'm just curious.
We have 2 vice principals and 1 principal.
Okay, so is one high school, one middle school? Is that the way they do it? So you
I believe that's how they do it.
okay. And when Worthington came aboard and had some kind of an agreement as a special school choice student or group, we were getting funds because our superintendent was mentoring their district, so
We're no longer doing that.
Right.
We have shared administrative staff.
Right.
But not the superintendent, because they
Right.
now have their own.
So did they have additional, when was the additional vice principal brought in when a group of people came in from Worthington? Or is
No.
that, it was just a decision that the vice principal, there should be one for each of the middle school, high school?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure when my son graduated in '09, there was 2 vice principals back then.
It's been that way for a while.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that there was additional administrator hired when Worthington students came on board. No? It's been 2 all along?
No,
Okay.
how many Worthington students were there? 12 or 15 or something like that?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but they were paying more than a traditional choice in
Correct.
student?
They pay
And they were
$7,000.
paying more for the superintendent mentoring or something?
And shared
Okay.
administrative functions,
All right.
correct. Correct. So one of, I just heard back from Kristen about the E&D and school choice. So she's not sure what recommendation there is from the state about the percentage to keep from year to year of school choice. I don't know
Well,
if
It's a max
happen
of
to know
5 is what
that
Bobby told us.
That's E&D. School choice is different.
I thought you
And
said
so I don't,
E&D.
and she doesn't know off the top of her head, and I don't know if there are recommendations from the state. There is a legal requirement that we can't go above 5% for E&D.
E&D,
I don't know what that might be for school choice.
That you can't go above or below, or?
Right, I don't know if there are, I don't know.
Yeah,
if
I'm
there
not sure there are.
regulations, you know, I don't, yeah.
nothing in school
Okay,
choice.
there's nothing in school choice.
Okay.
So, what Kristen shared with me is that she, rightly, as I know Norris is concerned about there being a major emergency and not having the money for that. Now, in the case of Norris, if that happens, Norris comes to Southampton and Southampton figures it out, hopefully.
Or
In
not?
the case of Hampshire, that happening, there's 5 towns
Yeah.
that we need to go to.
Right.
And so there's always been, concern, particularly among the regional schools, to try to keep more of that in case there is a problem, because you were trying to get, you're squeezing blood out of 5 turnips.
Yeah.
That said, she is completely amenable to looking at our use of those funds to see how we can figure it out, understanding, if everyone understands that is kicking the can down the road, and we're kicking it and kicking it and kicking it, and so we saw what happened with Norris. It's just a concern. So if people are aware of that concern, then there's things that we can do, and I think the school committee would be amenable with great reservations.
What's the dollar amount between the 4 point whatever and 2.5? Do we know what that difference is?
The 4.19?
Yeah, the current budget of 4.19, if it was to go,
If Southampton's was to drop,
yeah, to 2.5, what is the dollar amount that would have to?
Yes, it would be.
Close to 50%, I would say.
right.
If it was 5%, it would be half.
In my
Which
back
then-
envelope math last week, and the school committee was about $300,000 total. The gap and ours is a portion of that, maybe half of that, something like that.
We're like 55% in Southampton
Right,
now.
exactly.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thought. If the school committee decides to use these funds and kick it down the road, I wouldn't sit for a year and say, wait till next year's budget and say, what do we do now? You'd have to put a plan together to figure out to meet next year's budget, because it's going to be next year pretty soon. I had a
But
thought.
Aaron said, you know, if the rural schools thing passes, it'll be a game changer. So
That's 120, 30,000 for our school, our town. So it won't take the whole budget deficit, but it's
but all
money.
the other towns will get,
Yeah, it's money, yeah.
everyone in the district would benefit.
Yeah. Yeah, please. Margaret would appreciate you coming up there.
course not.
Jim Palermo, I'm a member of the Hampshire Regional School Committee. And I know that you guys know this, but I think it should be on the record.
Okay.
I think it's great we're getting together and talking about the nitty-gritty of the budget. But the real elephant in the room is the state underfunding. The auditor for the Commonwealth in February of 2012, pointed out that the cost of transportation and special funding, for example, for transportation for homeless children who are moved to another district, and actually the Massachusetts Teachers Association at one point, either that or the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, identified over 605 unfunded mandates. That was back in 2012. But that's we need more money. And yeah, we can maybe balance the budget, and it's essential. I mean, Norris School is the feeder school for Hampshire Regional. We're all one happy person. But in 2016, the state auditor again mentioned the unfunded mandates, but noticed that there's nothing that they can do. We also have to remember that we have, and this is my personal opinion based on my research, we have a governor, a commissioner of education, and a commissioner of secondary and elementary education who are devoted to charter schools. And there's all sorts of reports here. The MTA put out a report indicating the major PACs and financial groups that are pushing the schools towards charter schools. There's also the Matrix did an interesting sort of study myself. There's a direct correlation between the number of square miles that a school district serves, its student population. Obviously, the transportation costs are what's involved in the square mileage. But with regard to the per teacher or the pupil cost, if you have a larger student population, obviously you're spreading your fixed costs over a larger group, and so you bring down your per pupil costs. But even the state came out with a study that shows that population in rural schools is dropping across the state. And I mean, those are the structural things that we should, as citizens of this state, be screaming at our state legislators for. I think we're blessed to have some new elected officials from Western Massachusetts who are dedicated to this issue that we can lean on and who will do their very best to bring about change. But I just read, for example, I know this is hearsay, but
Don't start.
but I just read that in a recent House of Representatives, somebody was sitting in for Mr. DeLeo, and he said, Mr. DeLeo and I vote yes. And so all the other members are saying yes, yes, yes. And I just got a message, the vote is no. And so everybody changed their vote. They also just killed a bill in the state legislature that was proposing that legislators have a 72 or 76-hour leeway. They get the document first before they vote. They want it 72 hours before the vote. That was voted down. I mean, we have to face the fact that the state is not doing their part, nor is it motivated to. It wants charter schools.
And it's forcing us to be sitting here.
Right,
doing that.
and I mean, anything we can to help the schools, I'm in favor of doing it, but somehow we have to really get actively involved and put pressure on, and for example, the new rural school budget and so forth, that's if they pay it.
Right.
you know?
Right.
And there's a thing that, you know, the state is mandated to pay for required by law to pay for mandates unless it is subject to local acceptance. Well, in this process, we start putting a budget together, that's tacit acceptance. So the school department has no way of saying, look, you want us to provide transportation for displaced children? You know, we're happy to do it, but we can't afford it, we're not gonna do it. You have
let
to
the
pay
state
us.
take over.
Right.
Well, I mean, they're obligated to pay the full amount unless there's local acceptance.
Well, like you said,
I
once
don't
we
know what
pass the
local
budget-
acceptance means. You put together a budget, we've accepted it.
Right.
Well, yeah.
But
And so, I mean, I think this meeting is great. I'm happy we're doing it, but there is an elephant in the room. We are kicking the can down the road, and it really takes more funding, and we just can't sit back and let the state balance their budget by not paying their bills.
We all need to contact our legislators and
Yeah,
complain about it.
and our legislators, I know, are very actively concerned about it.
Although the number of legislators in Western Mass is so low compared to the rest of the state, it's hard sell to get people in the eastern part of the state to.
And frankly, well, I shouldn't go into that, but I mean, I'm not in favor of term limits for elected officials. However, I am in favor of term limits for leaders in the legislature. For the speaker, for example, 8 years.
I
The
don't
president,
want to get
8
into
years.
that. That's going down a whole
But,
different conversation. We can have a whole meeting on that, Jim.
But yeah, but I mean, it is special interest groups are crippling the state, and we
Yeah.
might as well admit it.
Okay.
And
Can
you
I-
were talking about,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, the legislators having 72 hours to review it. That's one thing I noticed at the last school committee meeting. You folks got your numbers at that meeting, and you had to vote on those numbers at that meeting. So you had no chance to look at them. I would suggest that you back this whole process up and use, estimated numbers long before that meeting comes, because I didn't see anybody challenging those numbers at that meeting because you didn't have a chance to read them. I mean, so that process is, in my mind, a little broken and needs to be backed up 3-4 months so you can sit down with some numbers that were this year, estimate for next year, and talk about numbers. It's tough. I wouldn't want to do it. But now, so who hasn't spoken that we can get up there? Because I think we like to hear from everybody, and I don't mind semi-embarrassing people to get them up there. So somebody, you folks want to get up there and talk about what your thoughts are and how we can help this out?
Tammy, you're not shy.
No, I already spoke, but I'm on board with what Rini was saying. And she just beat me to it about the administration. I don't know how it's structured, whether you have the principal, the vice principals, assistant vice principals, secretaries to the vice principals. I don't know how it's all structured, but instead of cutting programs, maybe we can look at how fat it is at the top before we cut programs. Again, I don't know how it's structured. Is there any meat on the bone up there we can grab and put towards the budget? Not that they're not deserving of a job, but it is something that we have to cut someplace, and maybe it's better to cut somebody at the top, fat cat, than cut a program and hurt. It always seems like when budget season comes along, it's always geared towards threatening the kids and the service of the kids, and the kids are going to lose this, and the kids are going to lose that. But I think we've maybe look at the top and urge you guys to do that. I'm not against the schools whatsoever. I had two kids that graduated from Hampshire Regional, and it's a fantastic school. I coached basketball up there for 7 years. Enjoyed that. It's a great school. And I like all the administration. Everybody's great, but it makes some tough choices, and I think we got to make it not about the kids, but elsewhere.
Yeah, it's something towards what you were saying, My question was, do we have the ratio of student to teacher at Hampshire and the ratio of student to teacher at Norris? And more importantly, the ratio administrator to teachers, or department heads to teachers, so that we
support
get some
staff.
sense of how it's organized
Right.
and what people's responsibilities are and where the money's going. And I think the biggest question I have about the budget numbers I see for the administration is I don't see one full picture. I see Southampton's share.
And I've been asking for that all
I don't
along.
see what it costs for all 5 towns for central office personnel. And that raises lots of questions. I mean, I'm not sure why they're slicing and dicing and presenting a budget like that when we're all responsible for the full budget. Let's look at the numbers. I mean, I know what our share is, I guess, if I want to take the time and extrapolate from the percentages and so on and so forth. But I think it's good to see it in black and white.
Yeah,
I also think I don't get a chance to see the entire thing either, and it's kind of bothersome to me because when I look at the leadership of, on the municipal side, fire chief, police chief, highway department, town administrator, there's frankly no comparison when it comes to the
Right,
schools.
we're picking the police chief, we're picking the police department, the highway department, the police department, down to how much copy paper
Yeah.
it costs every year. And I know we don't see that out of the Hampshire Regional budget, but it's just usually one line item. But just to go a little bit further, not picking on just Hampshire Regional, but I mean, I think what I just said before should also be done at the local level as well, at the Norris School. Is there anything there we can look at so that they don't get hit as bad? Maybe it's time to reset at that level and then move forward.
Okay, so with regard to your question about admin and central office, there's one principal, there's a superintendent. In the high school, middle school, there are 2 people in the main office. A couple years ago, they were reduced from full-time to 0.8, so each of those is 0.8. We have 1 full-time administrative assistant in guidance, and 1 administrative assistant full-time in special ed. And that's where we are.
And what about the superintendent's office?
And the superintendent has 1 administrative assistant.
So Bobby and then,
Well, and then business manager.
She's a
So
business
she's
manager.
not, right, she's a business manager. And so that's a different.
So he has an admin, the business manager himself, you're saying?
Correct.
There's more in central office.
yeah, I think there's more at the central office, I agree.
Special ed's in central office, curriculum director's in central office.
And well, and there is curriculum director, and there's a special ed director. But they were talking about administrative assistants, and that's where I was going from. But there is a curriculum director as well.
There's still admin.
There's
though, yeah.
a special ed director, and there's the technology.
The special ed and technology, is that just for Hampshire
No,
Regional?
technology is also
for
for
the whole-
Norris Central, yeah,
Okay, good,
right.
okay.
And there was an office manager in the main office, and that position was reduced 2 years ago. So that was eliminated completely. That saved about $10,000 or $15,000.
Okay. Hey, John, you're gonna-
Nurses are there?
There's 2 nurses.
That's, I mean, that there's much larger schools that can go with 1 nurse. So I
And
don't know
they
if
did
that's
have 1 nurse for a while, and then 1.5 nurses. We're just seeing more students come in with more needs, and more students with on special education programs with more health needs, and that's one of the items of, I guess you would call it programming. I'm not sure what would you call it, but over the past couple years, we have increased our ability to deal with students on the autism spectrum, as well as students with more serious health requirements. And so we're able to either keep those students in district or bring in those students from other districts. And those nurses help support that as well as the athletic program, because they are required to give physicals to students. We now have the concussion tests every year. You know, there's regulations keep increasing on what we need to provide from a health and welfare standpoint for our students.
Okay.
There's also an assistant
Bill, you have to go up here? We're getting everybody to the podium. Greg and Tammy are next.
Bill Curran. There was also an assistant superintendent position that was cut about 5 years ago. The central office, I think you'd agree, is run pretty skinny,
Yeah, I mean, with an admin and a business manager and the superintendent, that's nothing big at all.
Right, and department heads that cover all the.
Yep.
all the
Yeah, I don't
skills.
think we're telling you where you would want to cut. We're just trying to figure out what's the best way to do it. Do you have any?
I didn't know the structure.
Yeah, no, that's valid.
No, it's an excellent question, and there are a lot of school systems and a lot of towns, I'm sure, that
Phil, you're going to have to talk towards that microphone in front of you. That's what goes out to the people there.
that can be cut at the top.
Right.
I don't think Hampshire Regional is particularly top heavy.
Do you have any ideas on how to manage this budget issue this year?
I think certainly we're going to have an interesting discussion on Monday on ways that we can. We're essentially going to have to cut. I mean, and where those cuts are least going to affect students. That's how we've always approached cuts. I've been on the school committee for 9 years, and the first 4 years, 5 years of that, we had to do cuts every year. We haven't had to do cuts in the last couple of years, but I think all schools have gone through this, just as all the towns have. My concern, both for Norris School and for Hampshire Regional, my kids, I have a son who's in college and a daughter who's still in high school. They were able to take advantage of services when they were very young at Norris School that helped them later develop into really good students. And my concern for Norris is I don't think some of those services still exist, and I think it makes a huge difference. It's a really good investment, and I think the town's going to have to think about where we go from that. Nobody likes to do overrides, but at some point, and I know
Well, we
this
just
year,
did one last
I
year.
know,
Yeah.
I'm well aware.
Yeah, you voted.
I
Yeah.
live here and pay taxes as well.
Yes.
But at some point, you have to look at the school's severely underfunded, at the elementary school. I think we've done a good job of managing the high school. I think when you look at what we spend compared to other school districts, we're in line with where we should be, and I think the teachers and administrators do an outstanding job up at Hampshire Regional preparing kids for college and for careers. So, I think the school should be something we're very proud of. I think it's absolutely meetings like this where we look at every aspect of it to make sure we're spending the money wisely are important. But I don't think the problem lies in Hampshire Regional. In other words, I don't think that we're spending wildly and trying to, pave the hallways with gold. So I think at some point, state funding, town funding, something's got to give. And while it's an issue at Hampshire Regional, I think the real issue is at the Norris School. I mean, I think that's where we really have to look as a town what we value and what we want to invest in our kids, for their future.
Yeah, I don't think anybody disagrees. When people move into town, I've said this a million times, is school is very important, but a good police department, good fire department. So it's a mix, and that's where we have to balance out that here.
Yeah,
And
I don't envy your jobs. Yeah,
it pays well, Phil.
yeah. Is it more than
Just like yours.
Yeah, same as you get, yeah.
the same pay scale, right? Doubles every year.
But I think one of the issues is Norris gets voted one vote at a time by every resident. Hampshire does it on 5 towns, and it's been a pretty fairly easy process where you got people in town here who don't have a connection to the school. They don't have a connection to the library or the fire department, so their vote is, I don't want to raise my taxes. And everybody gets one vote, and it's, depending on the year, you get some sympathy, and other times you get none. So it's a tough sell.
I agree with you, but when you look at all of the services, but schools in particular, when people are picking out a town to live in, I don't think there's anything more important. The lifeblood of a town is having young families move in. I don't think there's anything more important that people look at than their local school. So
It was funny at the
I just think schools are an excellent investment, I guess is how I would.
the Open Space Review Committee we were at last night, and somebody brought up a updated fact that for every dollar we get in from a new family in town, we spend $1.19. So families coming into town don't add to our bottom line. It's great that they're coming in, we want that, but we need more business too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Well, when
I
I
don't have
moved
any
in, I
ideas
looked
for
at the
you.
water quality and I looked at the police department.
yeah. So I think we look at everything. But I think we're all saying the same thing. We all have great schools. I mean, we spend $12,000 a year on students at Norris, 17 at Hampshire. That's a deficit. Our teachers in both schools are paid fairly. They're at top of the ranges. They get good benefits. So we're taking care of that portion of the schools. We need to take care of the kids maybe a little more.
Oh, yeah, and I agree. I guess my point would be that the 17 we're paying at Hampshire is much more in line with what other schools, other towns, other regional districts are paying per student. It's the amount that we're really underpaying for the Norris School that is an issue that at some point we'll have. The town's coming to a point where we're going to have to address that. Norris is a wonderful school. It is a wonderful school. And it needs to have a future as a wonderful school.
It's amazing the quality we get out of Norris at $12,000 a student, so.
It truly is. It's a testament to
My
the
kids
staff
went
there.
through there,
The staff there is outstanding.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, saying 17 is in line, but even 17 is the lowest of all the regional schools in the area, right? I mean, Aaron brought us all those numbers.
Yep.
And 12 just is.
Yeah.
But Norris, among the towns in our district, just in Hampshire Regional, Norris is the lowest per student of all the 5 towns. And
Yeah,
they're
it's
much
significantly underfunded.
smaller than Southampton, obviously, because we're the feeder to the high school. So, I mean, that does say something. The other thing I'm concerned about, Norris is the feeder to the high school. If we continue to dilute those programs or overfill those classrooms or don't offer services, these kids are not going to be eligible or qualified for the special advanced programs that everyone is talking about putting in place. They're going to be less qualified.
Well, that was my point. Both of my children, like I said, took advantage of services offered at Norris that I don't know, had they not had those interventions early, if they would have had the same kind of success that they've had later.
And those are the programs that are going to bring in school choice and
Yeah.
you're not going to cut your way to greatness.
Again, it's not going to be the easy decision, no matter how it goes. So, anything else? No?
That's it for me. Thank you
Appreciate
for.
it. Well, appreciate you
inviting us.
coming. So Greg and Tammy, either of you?
Gregory Bennett, the school committee, both Norris and Hampshire Regional.
So you have the dual
I get
responsibility.
exactly. I have one foot in each half of the table here that way. I have a daughter. She's in Norris. She's in 3rd grade, and I have one of my good friends has a son who's in 3rd grade at Westhampton. And the competitive disadvantage that my daughter will be at by the time that she reaches Hampshire Regional compared to the other elementary students is horrible. I mean, they don't get any computer programming classes. They had the one day out. We're kind of integrating that now more into the library, but Ryan, for example, has had that for 4 years now already over there. It breaks my heart, to be honest with you. And that's the big thing that I want to hear now. I mean, no one wants to make cuts, but we need to make sure it's being done fairly to both sides of the table. And I think I'm very happy that this is finally being addressed. Thanks.
Tammy? Tammy's one of our popular speakers. How are you?
Sorry. Tammy Walunas, 298 College Highway. John, at one point you had said that we were given the budget and it was like our first time looking at it.
At the numbers, yeah.
At the numbers. So this is my 4th time looking at this kind of budget. The last 3 years, we were given these charts of where things were being spent, capital, that Kristen produced for us. And then from that, she made up these wish lists that we would say, okay, you gotta cut this down, you gotta cut this down, and then the whole group was presented, not just Southampton, but the entire school committee was then presented with A, B, and C that we looked at
Options,
and negotiated. Correct. This year, when we were talking with Aaron early, we said, you just gotta do the one, that's it.
Yeah, level service,
Kristen produced that for us, and we never even had the sub-finance committees and all that we've done previous years. We knew we can't add anything, well, except for the van, which I think we've seen has helped
Yeah.
with the other school. And we're paying over $17,000 for a van for one student.
But that's kind of that out-of-the-box thinking that everybody needs to do. That's a
Yeah.
good program.
So, you know, we kind of knew that one budget was going to come to us, but now that we're hearing from all the towns, it was a huge eye-opener being up at the Westhampton Town Hall and hearing everybody and what other towns are being forced to do.
So, but what you didn't know is that was going to be $400-something thousand more.
No.
And that was the shocker, I would think, when you see that.
Yeah.
You know it's going to be a level service, but in your mind, my mind anyways, I wouldn't be able to put a number on that until I saw it.
Yeah.
And that's what happened.
So I'd like that you guys want us to look back at insurance options and things like that. That was being on contract negotiation. That's one of the things I brought up 3 years ago. Should we be looking at this? Should we be trying to get more in line with what other towns are doing? And it was something that, well, let's focus on these things here. Well, now we're in that contract negotiation time again. I think it does have to be brought up again, even though we can't do the increases that they want, and we're promoting, oh, we're going to take this away from you now.
Yeah, and I don't think the idea is to take away anything. It's kind of massage what's given. What will be better for you if you don't have this? Like in my mind, longevity bonuses, that's a select group of people that get that.
Right.
Can we take the money and put it and spread it out to more people so they get something more in their base? I mean, that's just, you know, HMO versus PPO, you know,
Yep.
costs and all
And
that.
those are things that,
Yeah.
once you brought them up, people started, oh, okay, well, if you just only offer one option, how much is that going to save us? So those were things that really helped, that sparked conversation later on. And so, you know, that's what we need. We need to hear, oh, there are other things that we can do.
And
within
I
that
think
one?
nobody should be afraid of giving an idea. Yeah, because I got the sense, and it may be the wrong sense, it was one meeting, that there was a lot of quiet people around the table. And, you know, there were certain presenters, and then people voted and going from there. So we need more people, and there's a good group here to you know, get ideas and throw them up there. And they're not all good ideas, but they can be discussed and decided on, you know?
Well, that was the main reason I ran to be on school committee. I had questions.
Yeah.
I'm always asking. I was always bugging, just like I bug you guys.
But we appreciate it.
Always bugging Craig.
Yeah.
And now Aaron's got to know my face now. So that's where we were at with the numbers and everything. I highly agree. There's certain areas that we do have to cut, and Norris is a feeder school.
Yeah.
You know, my daughter took advantage of a couple reading classes there when she got to Hampshire. She was able to be in the special reading there, but when she got to Smith Voc, they worked to get her off of her IEPs.
Okay.
So that first year, freshman year, by the end of it, she didn't need to be on IEPs. She had learned enough from Norris, from the middle school, that once she got there, she was able to apply what she learned. I
And
sometimes,
she's doing well, right?
Yeah, I sometimes don't know if that's happening at Hampshire, that we're working to get the kids off and to train them, because out in the real world, they're not going to have all these capabilities given to them. And so we need to start training them on how to be self-sufficient and not have everything given.
You know, it's funny, I had a meeting today at work, and it was somebody who graduated from Hampshire Regional. I was going to tell you this anyways. And I was going over some accounting and checkbook with the person, and I said, didn't you get personal finance in high school? You know, because regional? I knew there was a class. He said, oh, there's one class, and it fills up quick, there's one teacher. he says, I wish it was mandated that we had personal finance. He couldn't balance a checkbook. He had a hard time with his taxes and all that.
Yep.
So,
Mm-hmm.
it is now?
Yep.
Okay, he graduated,
Statewide?
so, for the what again?
For the Commonwealth, it's
Okay, so every
Oh, it's another
student,
unfunded mandate?
okay. So every student has to
But
take a
yes.
personal finance class before they graduate? Good, so I'll go back and tell them, you just graduated too soon.
Yeah.
I don't know too many parents, though, that feel like their child with special, or their teen with special ed is getting too much services.
Right.
I mean, my
Well, I'm
youngest-
just, if they're trying to keep kids in a classroom to keep that class funded and that teacher there, are they not really promoting those children to find their full advantage, to move? And fortunately, my child was able to learn what she needed from Mr. Smith at Norris. And to this day, when she's writing a paper, she still falls back on the things that he trained her.
That's good,
And, that's the feeder school.
as well as the other 4 schools in the other towns, of course.
Yeah.
So anybody else from this group want to say anything?
Can I ask a quick question? Just,
Yeah, go ahead up there. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, the total health insurance for the school, we were talking, is a little over $2 million?
Yeah, 2.1, 2.2 million?
Yeah. Now,
That's retirees and active.
what is there a copay involved with this? Is it like 25, 75? What, I don't know what the match is.
I think it's 75-25. There are copays, and they're changing a little this year. What's the cooperative name that we buy we get health insurance from?
Hampshire Group Trust or something.
Hampshire Insurance
Oh,
Trust.
is that something that can be negotiated to where you go to maybe 60/40 or something different?
Well, they
All right,
did,
so-
they just did that.
6 years ago, that, it was 6 years ago, right? So 6 years ago, it was changed. And then, so 3 years ago, there was concern about doing it yet again. And Westhampton is still at the same percentage. And so they were trying to kind of match.
75-25.
And what is Southampton?
I think it's 70, Southampton here? 75-25 or 70-30?
70/30.
70-30. In regional, 75-25.
75%. So that is something that, we can certainly address in the negotiations. There's a couple other options. One is to incentivize people to go on to their spouse's health insurance. So there are ways to do that would help cut costs.
Yeah,
And there's
maybe a
also
payout
to
or
say, spouses need to be on their own if they have access to their own.
That's a new trend, yeah.
Right, and so there are some legal concerns about that I know our legal department is a little, concerned about implementing that because other districts are getting challenged when they have implemented that. But
negotiating,
it is, I would say it's on the table after looking at what everyone has had to say to us.
And personally, that is a very tough thing to tackle, because that's near and dear to people, insurance. My personal opinion is I'd rather get something somewhere else than say we're cutting your health insurance,
Right.
because that's critical stuff, especially if you have children.
So the other
But
two,
it is on the table.
right? So the other two things are salary, and so we are again negotiating salary. The teachers have asked for something that they are not going to get.
We don't want to go too much, yeah.
Right, but and that's how negotiations work, right? And so we will meet somewhere.
Yeah.
Last year, we were able to save some money with an early retirement incentive, which cost us a little bit upfront for this year, everybody, right? But we should see savings from that next year, because then we are bringing in teachers whose salaries aren't quite as high. There is always a trade-off there, because you have training costs. You might hire someone and invest money in someone, and then they decide to leave. Things do happen with that. So there's always a trade-off associated with that as well. The other big expense is transportation. And so this is a new contract year. This will be for our transportation. We don't know exactly what those costs will be. There was only one company that bids on our transportation. And so we are, our hands are tied a little bit in that regard. And so if we do want to start changing the landscape of the transportation budget line, it would require more investment up front, like we're doing with the van driver. So that's the other thing that we need to consider, that if we want to do that over time, it might require an investment up front.
I would think those rainy day funds, if you will, come up with a great idea, and it's gonna have you need to feed it $100,000 the first year. That would be a great place where it
Right.
comes from, with the return on investment
Right.
being quick. I cut that out. So I guess go ahead, John.
Back onto the insurance thing a little bit. I believe it was the finance chair from Goshen at the
Goshen Chesterfield, I think.
at the
yeah.
five-town meeting, right? We did talk about insurance a little bit, and there's a lot of savings because it doesn't get negotiated enough. If I recall, she said they hadn't negotiated terms in 9 years.
Yeah, they're just coming back, I believe, with some different copays, but there's no out-of-pocket at all there.
Right,
It's zero.
that was where I was going next, because there's no deductible. There's no charge for tests. The copays were very low at the ER and at the doctor's offices, which is all great.
Yeah.
I'm in the private sector. I don't know how
Yeah.
that works at the schools. If the state level, it's all the same like that. But that, to me, in the private sector, looking at that plan, that's pretty sweet. That's like the Cadillac
It was
of
like
plans.
a 15-25 for, PCP visit or something like
Right,
that,
but
depending
but my
on.
point is, if we could renegotiate, add a deductible, it's going to bring that insurance rate down substantially.
Right.
And on top of that, most people, I don't know what the percentage is, but you can, and this is a number they can look up, will not even get close to that deductible.
Right.
Every year.
Well, I think that's where the advantage of win-win is. If you can increase the out-of-pocket or the co-pays, and you only pay it when you need it, it decreases the premium, which we share with the staff, so they get more money in their pocket from that, and we share it. So that's what we need to do on the win-wins.
I think that's something that has to get seriously looked
Yeah.
at. Because, like I said, maybe that's the whole state is like that. I don't know. I'm private sector. I have a $1,500 deductible. I pay 25% of my insurance, and I spend a lot of money on insurance. But again, is that standard for the state or for
I think that's just
municipalities?
the insurance
Or-
trust that we belong to. That's what they are. So we belong to that group, and they set these different terms. We can go back to them and say we're interested in.
Right. What's the rate going to be if the deductible is $1,500?
Yeah.
And
Does
just-
anybody
it
from
just-
the school committee
at least-
sit on that?
At least get a quote on that. At least get a quote. What's it cost?
Yeah.
Just so you can.
That was my next question, is how do we get involved in that process?
Right.
Yeah.
I've been in
It's the
healthcare all
town's
along, and
treasurers that sit
obviously,
on it.
usually health benefits are pretty good when you're in healthcare, but I'm more in your world.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that what they have is comparably superior.
Yeah, benefits are tough to take away, but there's ways that you don't take away and both sides win. And I think that's where the negotiation comes in. If you go in and say, I'm taking away your health insurance, you're not winning that battle, and nor should you.
Right. You're not taking it away, but like I said,
Right,
you can
you're-
ask the
you're
question to
working
people, how many
together.
people would have, unfortunate for me this year, hey, I'm hitting my deductible.
Yeah.
But every other, in the past, not even close.
Yeah.
So it could really bring the number down a lot as far as the premiums go, and a little bit out of pocket in the end.
Well, I think we can
But
be
other people will
creative.
hit that every year too.
Yeah.
So some people will get hit harder than others, but
And,
it's something we have to at least get a quote on.
And I don't know if we've ever offered a menu program that, we give people X amount of dollars to buy with the benefits that they want, the health insurance. Like you said, if, like I said it the right way, my wife has insurance, and I'm paying for a family plan, and I can save X amount of money, and it costs her less on hers, I save money. It doesn't hurt me, So I think by getting the staff involved with some of the process, they're gonna feel like we're not trying to take something. It's, how do we better the whole plan?
Where I work, we offer incentive to be on somebody else's insurance.
Yeah.
It's not a lot, but it's something that supplements paying for the other insurance plan as well.
Well,
You
where
know-
my wife works, same with you, is if I have insurance, she's got to come on my plan. So
Yeah, I don't know if you can make that happen, but it's.
I don't know if that, I don't know if that's good, but that's just a trend I've been hearing about.
Yeah, right now, Valley Health Systems, which is Holyoke Medical Center and affiliates, they will not cover spouses on the plan if they have an option to have a coverage elsewhere.
Okay.
There's a lot of change, it's all being done internally.
I've heard that too, where if your spouse can have her insurance, good, she has her own insurance or his own insurance, and you're gonna be on a single plan with our insurance, and that brings the.
So I think the key
And
is
how-
to
how
be
is the school
creative.
structured? Is our school running like that, our school plan?
For the health insurance, you can take it, it doesn't matter if your spouse has it or doesn't have it. It's pretty,
Okay.
yeah, it's just, yeah.
that's one of the things we can look at when our attorney is.
Yeah.
We could make this an unfunded local mandate.
Can I say, can you repeat what you said when you said something, but I didn't get what you said?
The towns that belong to the Hampshire Health Insurance Trust, the treasurers of those towns sit on that board.
Okay. So we can talk to our treasurer.
So this actually is just responding to something Tammy had said about the IEPs, because I wanted to make sure I wasn't talking out of turn. So in general, the number of students on IEPs across the nation has increased, and that's partially because of parent advocates and lawyers getting involved in students' education. Hampshire is slightly above the state average, and it is something that the school is dedicated to working with, and so next year's professional development is actually, part of it is going to be devoted to setting what are called growth expectations. So that should help that, because students on IEPs are more costly to a school district. So it is definitely on the radar.
Yeah. Thank you. So we're going to leave the room with the same $400,000 deficit we came in with, because we can't change anything. But I think we've got at least some ideas that you folks can bring back to the school committee meeting. I know I'll be there, and Francine, you're going to be at that? So the 6 members of the committee here, how do you anticipate discussing this?
Oh, do you think that they're going to come Monday with a reduction?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to address the 6. That's okay. I didn't want to. 6 members of the Hampshire Regional School Committee. How are you folks going to get together and talk about options before the school committee? And I guess I don't need to know how, but are you hopefully going to do that so you can decide if any of these options that we're talking about make sense when you go back?
Or will you see a printed budget like this and have to vote on
I
it?
think there'll be a reduction.
Aren't you guys under the impression there's a reduction occurring? Because I was at admin advisory on Monday, and,
I'm under the impression there's a reduction occurring.
okay.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I was under the
Lock into a
impression
reduction.
they're reducing the
Okay.
budget. That's what was said, and that Bobby's been working on it.
Yeah,
I don't know
but
what that
still.
means for you guys, but
But what does that mean?
John?
I don't know, I just.
I know a gentleman at the HMAC meeting last week, forget where he was from, asked Superintendent Osborne to bring in a balanced funded, I guess that's right, balanced funded budget, and what the issues would be by cutting that funding back to current. So basically, whatever the budget was last year, use the same budget and tell us what the issues would be with staffing and cuts.
Level
think-
funded and level service.
Yeah. I wasn't getting there.
Level funded and level service, and what's the difference in services that would be lost under a level funded?
Yeah, level service we already have, level funded and with the losses under that, yeah.
It's an exercise we went through last year.
Yeah,
And
so,
John,
yes.
I would encourage them to do that individually and not to
Yeah, right.
get together before the meeting, so they
So
don't
that would be
violate the open meeting law.
Open meeting law.
But I would
Well,
encourage them to think about that beforehand.
Yes. Good point, Ed. So, any other questions or thoughts? Really appreciate you coming. I think we went a long way with at least discussing the issues, and hopefully we can come up with something, but we'll be at the meeting on Monday, is it?
Monday.
Okay,
Right.
so.
6:30.
It's gonna be fun. Well, it's gotta be done, and, hopefully we come to some agreement that helps both schools and the rest of the town. So, thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Nice seeing you. Bye-bye. We're going to do open time for the public.
Jim, Jim. Make a motion to adjourn.
Hey, John, I make a motion, we adjourn?
Well, no, we can't right now. We got to have open time for the public, so we're going to take a 5-minute recess, okay?
Cancel that.
Okay, everybody, we're gonna come back in session. We're gonna come back in session. Okay, we're back in session. Last thing we have on the agenda is open time for the public. Is the public out there? Miss Walunas, how are you?
Good.
I thought the public left.
Come on, folks.
Tammy Walunas, 298 College Highway. At our last meeting, Rini brought up something that was really, really good, and I don't see it on the agenda, and I just want to make sure, is that
This
something?
agenda was
Unfinished
specific
business?
to this.
Just to this, but it was the unfinished business.
Right. And
Will that be added to
we've-
the next?
We've talked to Ed, and he's gonna put that on.
Awesome, thank you. That
Thank
was
you.
my concern.
He ordered the fonts yesterday, I think, all the fonts installed.
So is there any other topics that can't wait till the next meeting? Okay. You're not on.
Are there any updates to the generator, given the large power outage?
The generator, to the best of my knowledge, is fully installed, which would leave two things. The electrical inspector inspecting it, and then there's actually an official commissioning of the unit, and then we'll be able to use it.
Okay, speaking of which, we had the windstorm recently. I'm going to be remiss if I don't bring that up. Charlie Knickie, our emergency manager, was involved with that. Ian Illingsworth, our police chief, Ed, and I were involved on the periphery, very, very little. We didn't do much, but it was, I know I was out 20 hours. So the highway department, everybody that was involved, congratulations, and a thank you from all of us. I think you got us through a hard time. It did?
They were still installing poles, so that may have had something to do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a tough 20 hours. So thank you to everyone involved. Anything else? Okay, a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous, thank you. Thanks, Tim.